GitHub has transformed the way more than 100 million developers collaborate on projects. In June 2018, Microsoft purchased GitHub for $7.5 billion. And since then, they have been delivering results with many tools, including one called Copilot, which has helped developers code 55% faster. It's no surprise that Microsoft took notice, and Copilot is coming to a Microsoft app near you. So today I'm talking to Allison Weins. Allison is a senior project manager at GitHub. She worked with many teams inside both Microsoft and GitHub and is an expert on the tools developers use daily, like Copilot, projects, and CodeSpaces. Now, last time we met at GitHub Universe, you were in charge of one of my favorite tools, GitHub projects. So can you talk a little bit about your journey into two of the most exciting technology companies in the world, first at Microsoft and then at GitHub?
Yeah. Way back when, I actually thought I might go into medical school and be a doctor when I first started college. But it turns out that sort of research did not quite catch me as much as my computer science classes. After making a quite drastic switch in major, I was lucky enough to get a internship with Microsoft my junior year, where I was paired with the Visual Studio team. And I've been in love with developer tools ever since. I think the thing that is so exciting is I get to wake up every day and think about how to make so many people in my lives who are software developers, how do I make their lives easier? And how do I help them build the software that I use and so many of us use every day?
So
And
much.
so from, yeah,
I was going to say so much fun, and I think that that's quite exciting. So you actually, it's so typical of developers, and I know that that happened in my life. Like I know that I wasn't really going for computer science; it was more like journalism at school, and I kind of fell into computer science once I went to school, and I found out what I really enjoyed doing. So that's a great story. How did you get then from Microsoft into GitHub?
yeah. So at Microsoft, I've always been involved in sort of Visual Studio, and I got roped into the CodeSpaces initiative, which was a joint sort of offering through Microsoft's developer division as well as GitHub. And so I sort of worked in the middle for a bit of time working on the CodeSpaces offering, and then sort of made the official transition as CodeSpaces became a fully GitHub offering with that team a couple of years ago. And so it was a very smooth transition. There's really tight collaboration between my old teams at Microsoft and the GitHub teams I'm on now. So in some ways, it doesn't feel like it changed all that much. It just sort of changed what goes under my name when I do talks like this, which company.
Yeah, did you feel any sort of, I don't know, impact in when GitHub was acquired by Microsoft or Microsoft to hear that GitHub is getting acquired? Like, is that where you first sort of started, I don't know, learning more about GitHub, or how did you actually get into that? I mean, well, I guess CodeSpaces you mentioned was actually like a Microsoft product, right? And then it just kind of shifted over into GitHub. Is that kind of how it all went down?
There were it's more like, there was some ideation, we had like services stood up, and then it was a collaborative effort to actually bring it, fully to market and generally available. But it was like a collaborative effort. um, I think, in 2018, I was still very solidly on Visual Studio. So my day to day wasn't really impacted. I think, if anything, it just meant that we had connections that we could start to make to our GitHub counterparts and them to us, so that we could do these really cool, inventive things like putting code spaces right off of the repository page, which is eventually where it ended up living. Um, so I think, as far as impact to your question there, I think it's just
Hmm.
really allowed for us to have a really tight collaboration and do
Hmm.
more together, right? If we think about where Copilot lives from an editor sense right now, Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, those are teams that we can have really tight connection loops with. And I don't know that it would have been as easy, right, if we weren't all working under the same umbrella.
Well, that's pretty exciting, and I really love that product. I mean, we use it a lot at LinkedIn now. I think we have over something like 700, 800 repositories that use that
Wow.
tool. And so it's really, I'm really happy and I don't know, honored to have been a part of bringing that, which has had such an impact. I mean, it's so difficult sometimes to get things that are organic inside a company. Like if you have an idea or you start doing something, to see other people pick it up is really special. So that
Yeah.
was really a fantastic thing for me. And now it's just sort of become part of, the everyday for us. So, with, like I said, 700, 800, repos now that are GitHub repos, it's now part of the LinkedIn, especially the LinkedIn learning experience. And it all just came from, me actually trying to solve a problem, which I think is sort of the way that most great things happen. So super happy and really thankful to you and your team that because you really allowed that to happen for us and brought it into something that changed the way that LinkedIn works. So it's hard to have an impact like that in a big company. So changing a company is really special. So that was really really cool. So let's talk about probably out of all the GitHub projects, I think the one that's getting the most press right now is Copilot X. Which is the ChatGPT implementation for GitHub. Last week we had Burke Holland do a demo of it in VS Code, which was fantastic. He's brilliant. But he
He is.
said that you would be able to tell us a bit more about the release and where that project is.
Yeah. So I think one distinction here, and this is a common sort of misconception that I hear, is the chat functionality is not quite the same as Copilot X. So Copilot X was really this moment, this release where we were sharing our vision for what Copilot looks like, not next month, but really next year, next, sets of large amounts of time. It's really our vision for what Copilot is going to turn into, which is really four things in our mind. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere that you expect it to be, whether that's in your PRs, in your editors, or in your documentation. It is conversational. You can engage with it in the same way, in the same modality as you would a coworker. It is personalized in that it should have context from what you do, from what your teams do. Maybe perhaps there's a future where your model is, slightly tuned to what your company needs or what you need. Do you need more efficient suggestions or do you need more security minded suggestions? And then finally, trusted. If you don't trust the tech, if your companies don't trust tech, we're not going to get anywhere. And we can build the most amazing smarts, but if you don't trust us, you're not going to use them. And so Copilot X is really just the first signal of that vision that we are building here at GitHub. And Copilot Chat is but one aspect of that vision, and the one that is coming most eminently. So we've just started opening up our technical preview for that.
Mhm.
It's very small. As you can imagine, the GPU constraints come for us all, and these sorts of smarts are not as easy to run as we would hope. We're constantly looking at ways to more efficiently use our GPUs, but it is certainly a rush in the industry, right? And I think
Mhm.
GPUs are the new. If you've got some extra ones, I know there's plenty of people who are probably badgering you for them. Uh,
Yes.
and so we're slowly starting to expand the Copilot Chat technical preview. Again, we just have to be very conservative because we want folks to be able to use this rather than, have it spinning for a while because we've got 50,000 people making a request and we don't have enough to serve it up. So
Yeah.
I ask for patience for you all. Sign up for the preview for sure. And just know we
Mhm.
are working our very, very hardest to get this out to you as soon as we can. But we really want to deliver an excellent experience, not just open the floodgates and, have a poor experience for folks.
Yeah, I think that Burke talked about that last week. And I like what you said about trust. That developers have a different level that is required because what they're building has this huge effect on their own companies, and they expect something different from what I think ChatGPT itself gives you. ChatGPT, you talk to it, you kind of expect it to be wrong. Like it's okay for it to hallucinate. Like that about ChatGPT. It's, if you ask it questions about a person, that that answer has to be verified, right?
Yeah.
Because of, it's still learning. But when you're talking about your code and commit and issue a pull request, that has your name on it. So it's not just ChatGPT help me write this code. It's, hey, I'm pushing code now that is, nobody's gonna, get mad at ChatGPT. They're gonna get mad at you perhaps for pushing something.
Right.
So that element of trust and that element of it's got to perform and that we have different expectations our developers is something that I learned last week from talking to Burke. So, uh, he said that he couldn't tell me when people had access, and you did mention that people have to sign up. Now, I have the wait list up right now, but for me, since of course, I signed up like a month ago because as soon as I heard about it, it says thanks for joining. All the links are going to be in like the show notes, so don't worry if you can't get to it. I'll as soon as I finish posting this episode, we'll put the link everywhere. I don't know if there is like a shorter link from Microsoft, but yeah, you have to, sign up for it and get on a waiting list. They are going through the waiting list as fast as they can and just be patient because I think, like what you said, everybody is trying to make sure that it's done right because,
Correct.
I feel like everybody has good expectations. I can tell you, like, I just the regular, this is, I guess, version 2 of Copilot. So I can tell you that I already can't live without version 1. It's so useful that I can't wait. I mean, I think like right now what I'm doing is basically using ChatGPT and Copilot. And I think that the Copilot Chat is kind of like a merging of the two.
Yeah.
So, I use like ChatGPT to do a lot more brainstorming,
Hmm.
but when I need a good answer or I need some code that I know is going to work, then that's what I use CopilotX because it knows the context, which is kind of my
Exactly.
favorite thing about it. So I
Yeah.
can't wait. Uh, and it goes to show you that even I, with many contacts in GitHub, I still don't have access. So,
Yeah. It's
Allison is my friend, and
trust
Burke said
me.
he couldn't help me, so it's not just
If
me.
I could wave my magic wand,
Yeah,
I would, and say it
yeah,
was ready. I would
hmm
certainly give it to everyone who wants it. But we
yeah,
really
but
try to keep our quality high. And I would hate for folks to
mhm.
get in and be
And
disappointed.
yeah,
Like I
get
want
a
to
bad
make sure that you're
experience.
going to have a magical experience in the same way that you
That's
do with
and I
Copilot
think
right
yeah,
now.
and I think what he demoed last week was really special, and I can't wait to have more access to it. In the meantime, what's out there already is fantastic. So in terms of like you talked about all these different products that are coming out, and one of the things that I mentioned in the intro was that everything is now uh, getting a Copilot, like even Excel and Word and PowerPoint. Like I'm not sure if when Satya mentioned this, I'm not sure if the Copilot branding is so fantastic that he decided to use it for everything, or if that was always his like master plan to like, you know, have everything be Copilot. But it is such a great name, and it's
It's a
so
great name. I mean,
yeah.
I love Copilot because I think it reinforces one of the things I'm constantly talking about in calls here, which is Copilot's not going to do all your job for you. Like it just can't. It's
Mhm,
not going to read your mind. You have to give it intent. You have to give it context. You have to help lead it. It's the
mhm,
difference for me between like running a marathon or like biking a marathon. The
mhm,
bike is going to get me there a lot faster, but it's still just a tool. If I'm not
mhm.
there pedaling and providing guidance and steering it, it's going nowhere. And so I love Copilot as a brand because that's what it is. It's your little Copilot. It's your buddy who's there sitting there beside you, another tool to help you just get where you want to get to a little bit faster.
That's very well said. So I do have to mention looks like the comments for some reason are not coming up, so I can't. Usually I
Oh,
can pull comments up, but I'll mention something that Fabio Nolasco said, which is most people seem to be expecting bad things from Microsoft buying GitHub. However, things actually improved a lot with many valuable innovations. And I think that that's what I noticed about the sort of the addition of Microsoft as, I guess, the host company. It feels like there's been a lot more development, like a lot faster, a lot of creativity, and a lot of really great stuff happening as a result of that. And I've been super pleased. And I feel like we had already been acquired twice, by first by LinkedIn and then by Microsoft, So I came from lynda.com and we got acquired. And then, when LinkedIn acquired us, that was kind of a concern, but it was a fantastic sort of purchase for us, and it didn't change us very much. It just gave us more resources. So, when then we got bought by Microsoft, and same concerns, and it was fantastic as well. They really kind of left us alone for the most part. So I knew when you guys came in, I've already been through it twice. I felt like, oh, these people, if they play it how they played us, that it's going to be good for them. And I feel like it has been, like, the amount of creativity, and I've never seen so much acceleration in terms of like creativity and products that are useful for people. So I mean, that's my kind of perspective on that comment. So in terms of usefulness, though, I think that the product that I think I've heard developers be perhaps the most excited about is this thing called GitHub for pull requests. Pull requests are how new features are added into, current application, but like releases and documentation, they can be a little bit cumbersome. So how does this feature help somebody?
Yeah. So, of course, very early feature here, but
Mhm.
effectively, what Copilot for pull requests can do right now is about generating a summary. So it can look at your files, it can look at what you've done, and it will generate a summary of the changes and sort of an explanation of the code paths. I think what's important, and one of the things we actually think is a great feature here, is that it explains the code as it is, which may
Mhm.
be different than what you intended the code to do. So we see it not only as a way to summarize and have better, robust details for a pull request for whoever's reviewing it, but it's also almost like that initial gut check of, does this code actually do what I want it to do?
Mhm.
And so that's what PRs will do right now. And that's what the team is working on further refining and improving.
Yeah, I think it's going to be amazing. And like I said, I have heard from developers that this is something that they're really excited about, because I feel like AI is really good at helping you do things that you might find a little bit cumbersome.
Mhm.
Productivity is like that. And I think that for PRs, like, if you've made changes to a bunch of files and you're trying to remember everything you've done, then maybe you have to do like a diff to see what's happened. I mean, it's just like a cumbersome sort of action that requires a lot of touch points. So this is like a perfect thing for AI. It knows what you've done. It knows what you've done, and it can summarize that. And I don't know if this is a similar or the same feature, but I saw something like that yesterday when I was having to do a release for a product. There was a little button that said, kind of automate the description of what's in this release, and it was able to see any changes that I had done. And I was like, oh, that is so beautiful, because I often forget what I did. Like, I forget what I did in the
Yeah.
moment, so it's
Yeah.
just
I
such a
mean,
great.
I think you've hit it on the nail there. Like,
Mhm.
problems that AI are really good at solving are when you need a lot of data and you need to hold a lot of context in your mind, quote unquote, mind at the same time, right? And if you're making a pull request and it touches 10 files, you now have to like really think about what are all those changes and
Mhm.
synthesize them in your mind and turn that not only, what are all the changes in the files and what is the greater story or changes that they attribute to, but how do you convert that from code to a summary that the next person can read
Mhm.
and use, right? And so that's just the sort of, I think, pathway where we're seeing Copilot really excel.
Yeah, that's the beauty. Like, anytime you can figure out what, AIs are best at, and also, free developers to focus on what they're good at. I think that that's the win-win of AI. So that is just a fantastic product that I'm looking forward to sort of its full development. Somebody mentioned that they, in the chat here, that they loved your demonstration of voice coding with Copilot. So maybe you can touch base on that since you've done a presentation about that. I have seen that before. I think I saw, was it Risel's demo at like Universe, like an early
Brazil,
demo
yeah,
of something? Yeah. Yeah. So can you talk about that feature maybe? And I didn't know that
yeah.
you had already demoed it. So.
Yeah, so that was also part of our Copilot. I mean, we demoed that at Universe, which was
Hmm.
great. So that demo's already been floating around for a little bit. But this is part of our one of our other technical pre.
Hey GitHub,
So
toggle
it's
code mode.
Oops, sorry.
Import pandas.
Oh, stop that. Just got too
yeah, we've
excited
got a
with
great
that.
little demo right there on the
Hmm.
page. So highly recommend folks go check that out. But yeah,
Yeah.
effectively think about this, very similar. It's just a voice conversational input. So we're just updating the way that you engage and interact with Copilot in the same way that we're updating it to be able to, engage via chat. So be sure to sign up for the technical preview if you'd like to give it a try. I know folks are very keen to hear your feedback on what we should do next.
Yeah, this looks like something fantastic for a tool like Pandas, where it's a data analysis tool, and I think it's kind of the future to be able to have the machine help you, analyze data. That sounds like the perfect feature for AI to do something with. So that's, I know, a tool that, can really help a lot of folks.
Yeah. And I think with voice in particular, right, it's just about making our tools more accessible across the board.
Hmm.
I remember I had like injured my wrist a year or two ago,
Hmm.
and things like being able to use voice to text transcription so that I could write my email still for my
Hmm.
job was such an incredible tool that helped me so that I
Hmm.
could actually recover instead of having to fight through it and try and type out things, right?
And hurt
So,
yourself
I,
even further. You don't want to,
yeah,
rely on that.
exactly.
That's amazing. Super useful. So when we first met, you were really pivotal in getting the CodeSpaces project launch, and that seems so long ago, though. And it hasn't been getting as much press as all this AI tools. So I did want to take a little bit of time to ask you how CodeSpaces is doing these days.
Yeah, CodeSpace is doing well. I mean, just at Universe in the fall, we announced the release of entitlements so that you get, I forget exactly how many hours free, but every user on GitHub gets a set amount of free compute so that you can actually try out CodeSpaces for your hobby project. Previously, it was, only paid, and now we've got it available for individuals, orgs, and you get a certain set just to try it out. Which, if I think about learning, which I know you care about,
Mhm.
this is a great way to kick off any tutorial repository without having to set up and clutter your personal computer environment.
So here's the sort of amount of time that you get depending on the amount of course that you're going to be using.
Yeah.
So this is pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, I feel like nothing in the world has been so life transforming for me personally, and then just for the company. And I mentioned that, just sometimes on LinkedIn, it's such a big product that getting like a button, takes like this huge team of people, data analysis, studies, beta tests. I mean, I was talking to a product team yesterday, and it was, I can't tell what the feature is, but just a feature just has to go through like a lot of testing, like bug bash, and there's so much in a
Yeah.
huge company, and to be able to have something change, not just the internal company's experience, but then the experience of all the learners has been fantastic. And this code space is really cool. Yesterday, I was also, I told you that I was programming something and had to do that release. Well, what
Mhm.
I was programming was something for a course that I was doing on really on Python and on actions, and I had to get to a point where I had to decide whether I'm going to tell the people how to install Python, the differences between like Windows Python and Mac
Make sure the
Python, and then
path
figure
is
out
set up
Python
correctly.
3. Yeah, yeah. And I went, well, I wonder, while I was designing the course, I was like, oh, I wonder how this would work with CodeSpace. And I was like, click, done. It, came with it. It had the right modules installed, and I was like,
Hmm.
this is ridiculous. Even like if you're trying to learn something, you just want to learn the thing that you're trying to learn.
Good thing.
You don't want to
Yeah.
worry about like downloading and installing and Macs come with like Python 2 and I really needed Python 3, so I have to go download something else. And it's like 30 minutes before you just get to the idea,
Yeah.
and I was working to I jumped in the ability to switch to like a different project. So I was also, while I was doing that, somebody called me and said, "Hey, I've got a problem with this other GitHub extension, not GitHub, I'm sorry, the Chrome extension that I'm doing. Can you take a look at the code?" Because I'm like the Bootstrap, go-to person. And again, think about like how you have to change context. Like you have to, if you're working on something and it's Python and you've got all the Python's extensions going and you've loaded up everything. Now you got to load up like, okay, now we have to have like the CSS, checker and the linter and whatever. And like you would have to go turn off your extensions or make sure they're not, conflicting, and then turn on some
Right.
different extensions. That stuff just go away. I jumped into the project. I'm like, yeah, you just need a couple of different classes here, indent this, whatever. Boom, done. So I could jump into a project, take like 30 minutes to fix the thing that they were having a problem with, and then go back to my happy Python project without screwing up my setup, my extensions. I mean,
Yeah.
if you haven't tried CodeSpaces, it's the I don't know. I
And I
feel like
mean,
I'm trying to
I
sell it, but I mean,
personally, I mean, I worked on CodeSpaces for close to 3 years. It's very near and dear to my heart.
mm-hmm,
And I think if we think about the way people learn, right? So many of
mm-hmm,
us just like to try things. And the beauty with CodeSpaces is if you try things and your environment is suddenly not what you wanted, you just delete it and start again. And that can happen in seconds, right? They're isolated. You can just throw them away. You can restart. And so it
mm-hmm,
really, I think for me, as someone who used to be so timid about experimentation, because heaven forbid I need to reformat my computer, right? Because I've messed up my installation and now everything is messy. Um, I can feel free and empowered to experiment because it's as simple as just like delete code space, create a new one.
You're not messing up your machine. Like you're always scared that,
Exactly.
man, it's so scary when like yeah you update like your npm to like some new version, and then all of a sudden
Ugh.
your whatever project you were working on doesn't work, and then it's like I know it's gonna take me another 30 minutes to like and like switch everything back or like try to figure out the five things that I need to do to make both of them work, and you just don't have time for that. Like who has time for that? And the ability to jump in with somebody else, like, hey, you want to jump on this project together? Let me show you, what I'm doing, so that you'll have an understanding of like how to modify, the extension if you need to adjust like the layout a little bit. So that's really great. Another project that I think, uh, I'm happy about CodeSpaces, but another project that actually helped us quite a bit get CodeSpaces working at LinkedIn Learning was GitHub projects. I think that for me, uh, one of the things that I did was kind of run the project of getting that happening for GitHub Universe. We had this partnership with
Hmm.
y'all that helped us get that, get the first like 30 or 40 like repos and courses going that used it. And so, I use projects, and it changed my life. I never wanted to, I want to use it for everything. I mean, the only thing that I don't like is that it doesn't, like non GitHub account people aren't easily kind of incorporated. So you have to kind of just
Yeah.
do it with your fellow nerds. But it's really, really useful. And I know that when I saw you last, you were working with that project. So what can you tell us about that project? Are you still heavily involved in it? What's going on with GitHub projects?
Yeah, so I had moved to the projects team last year and spent the better part of a year working on it. I've fully transitioned to the Copilot team now as of
Okay.
late February, but I still have lovely, lovely friends over there who are doing amazing work. So I think, a big one, we shipped roadmap, general
Hmm.
availability, I believe just last week, which is super exciting. I know my co-PM Riley and her team did so much work there. So, folks, you did awesome. I'm very proud.
Hmm.
Um, and we continue to look at things like enterprise adoption blockers so that we can help
Hmm.
those big customers really migrate to projects. Because I think it's one thing to use projects to manage a team of 20 or even an organization of 100. It's a very different game when we start talking about 10,000 developers and what they need,
Yeah.
right? So
Hmm.
expect to see so much more out of projects. Task lists continue to get lots of investment, and I know we've added a ton of folks from that wait list to task lists, and definitely
Yeah.
check that out. I know the team is always looking for information on how we can make that more easily usable, what you want from it. But this is just the first of the relationships, right? It's parent child.
Hmm.
And I'm sure we will have other ones coming for you after we
Hmm.
get task list nailed down.
Yeah, task list. I totally use, I guess I don't know what they were called before task lists, but the ability to create checkboxes like within, the communication that you're doing things, that was extremely useful because as multiple people were working on getting their own repositories for CodeSpaces done, I had a checklist on every piece of documentation, and we kind of worked with it. But now it's so much better.
It's
It's
super
so much
powered,
better.
right? You can
It is,
actually
yeah.
sort by it. You get progress on the parent issue. Um, you can like really traverse into the graph as you go from like, here's the tracking issue, here's one of the child ones. And
Hmm.
what I love is that you can actually have like multiple sets of task lists, right? It's not
Hmm.
just here's the tracking issue and here's the flat list of everything below it. It's like, here's the tracking issue. Here's everything that product needs to do. Here's everything that engineering needs to do. Here's everything that marketing needs to do. Because we're all collaborative teams, right? Nobody works in isolation. And so
That's
being
right.
able to split up and have, specialized task lists within your larger issue that represents the ultimate ship, I think is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and there's some great videos in this website, like this roadmap. I mean, first of all, I felt like you were reading my mind when these new features came out because I was like, it would be really good if this could be like a little easier, the check, the tasks list, which I'm
Yeah.
calling checklist. That would be cool. And another thing that I really loved was like all these different ways of viewing the same information so that I could send somebody a link to this is just the stuff that you're responsible for. So you're working on perhaps like five of these repos. We have a team of different people, the producers, the people who are in charge of the different languages at the time. So there would be like different versions of me who perhaps were in charge of making sure that if somebody had a Python question, they would be able to answer it. And then we had people from GitHub that we were able to. That was another solution that we needed something that we could work with, and then also, but also then invite somebody from the GitHub team to be able to answer questions if we had them. And so we wouldn't have been able to. We actually, everybody was like, how do we do this? Like, how do we? Because even though we are technically under the same umbrella company, like the tools weren't exactly able to
Everyone's got their
allow
own
us to,
tools.
yeah, allow us to collaborate together. Like our Slack is different than y'all's
Hmm.
Slack, and so everybody was really really stressed about how are we going to do this, and I'm like, why don't we just use the tools that GitHub has? And everybody, I think, was really floored about how great and efficient that was. So I mean, I think when I met you last at GitHub Universe, I was like so excited and thankful for projects. So make sure, I don't know a lot of people on that team, but they have my
I will be
eternal,
sure to send the high
I
compliments
I am
to all of the
eternally
team.
thankful, like to quote Toy Story 4 or 3 or whatever, whichever one it was. I'm eternally thankful because that solve so many things. And then it was just like a amazing experience, reports and all that good stuff. So one of the things I noticed in GitHub that it feels new to me, I don't know if you can tell me if it's new or if it's been around for a lot longer, is this thing called GitHub Next. It seems to be, there's people in that team. I don't know if that's an old team that is now doing everything or how it all works. What can you tell me about GitHub Next?
Yeah, so Next has been around in some form of another for quite a while. I think you're starting to see them more with the success of Copilot and all of the great things that they've been doing in the artificial intelligence space for our platform. But
Mhm,
they've been around. They're not brand new. They've had a couple different names through the years. But Next
mhm,
is the current iteration. And as I say here, yeah, they're investigating the future. So they are the researchers and the engineers who really care about thinking not just what's possible now, what's possible next year, but really like what's possible 3 years from now, 5 years from
mhm,
now. um, I think my favorite quote from one of the folks on the team, oh yeah, there they are, um,
mhm.
is this is a team that likes to stare into the darkness and figure out what's staring back. And I think it's really
That's great.
powerful that we have a team whose charter is to do that, right? They are not constrained by, you know, the legacy of users that we have right
Mhm,
now. Any feature I make, right, I have to make the trade-off of, do I fund investments in a particular feature that already exists in my product area, right? Or
mhm,
do I do something brand new? Do I do tech debt and fundamentals? Or do I take a moonshot? And
mhm,
GitHub's next, their objective is really to look at those big bets that we want to take. They are constantly trying to imagine, without the constraints that our product team has, what does GitHub look like in this next sort of vision that we think about for software development, and GitHub as a platform. So they operate relatively separate from the rest of our product and engineering teams. They get to do all these amazing investigations and research.
mhm.
And then when things start to pan out, we're brought in to start expanding that access.
Yeah, so I was just showing GitHub Blocks. One of the things that I'm probably super excited about, like the ability to, make the README documents like more interactive. That I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many good things in here. So here's we mentioned Copilot Voice for a while. I mean, this is like when I was really small and I came to the U.S. for the first time, my cousin who I was staying with she showed me a jar full of like change, and she
Mm-hmm.
said, take all the change you want. And at that time, you could just walk, over to wherever. And I was old enough to like be able to do this. But anyways, I grabbed of course, I grabbed every quarter on the money jar, and she said, go to the 7-Eleven. And this is the first time I've seen a 7-Eleven in my life, and it was. And when I saw that candy aisle for the first time, I thought I was in heaven, like just an aisle. You're a little kid, you see an aisle of candy, and you're like, why does this exist? This is the greatest thing ever. And I have all the quarters in the world to get whatever I want. I got a kite at 7-Eleven. I stuffed like comic books, candy. It's one of my greatest days ever, I think. But I feel like that when I go here, when I come here, like here's all the amazing stuff that perhaps I've been thinking that I needed or that I had no idea that I needed. And just like to have almost like like the skunkworks sort of team, like when they developed the Blackbird, that they had a team that is dedicated to doing this. I think this is part of the reason um, why GitHub itself as a company is so special, that you have these things happening that people take the time to do. And man, who does it? Like, more companies need to be doing that sort of stuff. So let's kind of back up a little bit and maybe talk a little bit more. Our audience is really interested in jobs and careers and such. So where do you think developer jobs are how do you think they're changing, and where do you think they're going, and what do you think this artificial intelligence is going to do to developer jobs, and what impact they might be having?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think as our industry has always shown us, things are always changing, right? New frameworks come out, new languages gain popularity, new architectures come into play, and so this is just yet another change that we are going through. And I think some of the immediate effects we're seeing, right, are a increased demand for folks who are interested in building and maintaining AI services. And
Hmm.
it's not just about building the model, although that is certainly a large portion. Like, I expect we'll see more and more demand for machine learning researchers who understand how to build, maintain, and tweak models according
Hmm.
to their user needs. But you also have to think about the whole delivery pipeline, right? You have these models, you have to figure out the right information to feed them in order to get the suggestion that you want out of them. So there's this whole new area of prompt crafting that is gaining steam. You also have, what's the infrastructure like for these things? How do we actually host these models and make sure that we have, good access to them when we're doing millions of requests on them for our service? You also have bits like, oh my gosh, why can't I think of it right now? I just
Yeah, I
lost
thought
it.
it's all right.
Um,
I thought of like prompt engineering. I've mentioned that before in the show that it's like the programming language of like the next 10 years is like people don't realize that getting the AIs to do, you
what you
know,
want.
yeah, it's like a skill unto itself, and it feels like how we program things. So that's super interesting that
Yeah.
you mentioned it again because it's becoming more and more, and the more you use AI, the more you realize, oh, I need to understand the structure that the AI wants in order to deliver what I need. So it feels exactly like a programming language, you
Yeah.
know?
The thing that I always liken it to is when the rise of, internet search came up,
Hmm.
right? We all had to learn how to search the internet. I know that feels like a skill that is just inherent these days because it's everywhere. But if you really think back to the very first
Mm.
time you were using any internet search engine, I bet you typed in the question exactly as you would ask your mother or a
Hmm.
coworker or whatnot,
Yeah,
right? And
totally.
there's a lot of filler words in there. And we probably all got terrible search results because the search engine was also looking for words like the and what and who and a question mark, right?
Mm.
And over time, we learned, oh, we don't need that. We learned how to craft our searches to give us what we want. And I think that is a very similar skill that we are seeing all of us develop in real time as we adopt these AI tools. Um, so
That's really
things feel
interesting.
very new, but I think
Mhm.
when you take a step back, they're still very familiar at their core.
Yeah, and we had the VP of AI for LinkedIn who worked at Netflix and he worked in Quora a few weeks ago, and he was mentioning that, you know, that things have really shifted in the world because AI is just giving you the ability to do things that you didn't know that you could do before. But in relation to search at Netflix, they are very concerned with you know how the recommendation engine at Quora. They're very concerned with like answering questions, and I think that we have been trained to program search engines to get the information we need. And what's happening now is that the way that you ask those questions is changing, and also that the way that you have to understand like what the AIs mean is also what the AI structure means is also changing. So in a way, it's funny because I feel sometimes that the AIs are kind of training me, like they're helping me figure out how to communicate better. So that ability to communicate is really what's driving, a lot of the innovation. Like if you try to do Midjourney, which gives you images, that's a great way to learn prompting because it's really
Mhm.
hard to get it to do. But it's part of it is like the problem is not that the computer can't give you what you want, is that you don't know how to describe it. So sometimes like
Yep.
the AI is training you by like just the ability to give you things and helping you figure out how to communicate better, maybe.
I mean,
So,
it's all
yeah,
trial and error, right? If we think about
yes,
how we've all learned as children, we're all just tiny machine learning little
hmm,
models. We
you're
do
right.
things, we get an output, we decide if we like it or not, and then we adjust the next time we do it. And that's really why I think, our pillar of conversational
Hmm.
as a sort of pillar for Copilot makes so much sense to me in my mind, because that's the way we learn as people in this
That's
world.
right.
It is through our actions and the reactions that happen. And so much of that is through communication, just like this in a conversation.
Hmm. And it makes you think about just exactly how even learning happens. And I just got reminded of both of our dogs who always make it into your conversations. Olive, your corgi, and Mojo,
Yes.
whom I call Mojo the coding dog, because he's just around whenever I'm programming. But like, if you think about how they learn things, it's a very similar sort of process. And I think whenever you see a shift, kind of a paradigm shift like this, you start thinking about, okay, how do I communicate and how do I get train anything to learn something new? We've gotten so used to the phones and the search engines and how we communicated in that sense. So everything's shifting now. So knowing what you know today, if you were back in school, maybe getting your computer science degree, what would you be doing? What would you tell yourself that you should do differently now?
Ooh, that's hard.
Right?
Uh, I mean, that's always a hard one, right? Because I'm pretty happy
Mm-hmm.
where I am. I don't know that I'd change all that much about it. I feel like a lot of my background here has
Mm-hmm.
helped me get to where I am. But if I was saying what would help me specifically for the job that I'm doing now with
Mm-hmm.
Copilot, I think taking a bit more of those like machine learning classes, like understanding more about what goes into prompt crafting,
Mm-hmm.
and the different types of machine learning models and what they're good for, because every sort of model is good for a different task. They're optimized in that way. And so I think having a stronger educational foundation there would certainly help me here. I think I've done a lot of
Mm-hmm.
learning on the job, which is great because my team is incredibly wonderful and smart. But that certainly would have helped with onboarding, I think, for me a little bit as I transitioned
Mm-hmm.
into this area.
Yeah, so you went to school and you have a computer science degree, and now you're doing product management. So how is that different from programming? And how did you maybe sort of made a transition from somebody who was in school learning programming to somebody who's like learning to do different tasks that are related to making products successful?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, I owe a lot to many of my mentors when I was in school who first turned me on to this as a career path. And I think they just sort of saw some behaviors or interests that they think would have trended or tended well for product management for me as a role, as a job, as a career. I think as I look back, some of those things were probably around the fact that I really enjoy understanding tech. I love talking
Mhm.
about tech. I think sitting down and actually programming things is something I could do. I do it a lot less now, so I'm far worse. I can do it, but I don't get the same sort of like rush of satisfaction when I solve one of those problems. For me, it was way more interesting. And the problems that kept me up at night were like, how do I think about, in college, what's the breakdown of this project that we're trying to build for like our final project as a team? Like, what is really our goal here? Like, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And sometimes that was just, we have to make a program that does X, but there's still understanding what is each person's strength. How do we break that down? How do we make
Mhm.
progress toward it? But sometimes they were open-ended projects, and we had to sort of like think like, what would we build that we actually think is going to be useful, ideally, in
Mm.
some way. And I found those sorts of problems way more interesting. And when I did my product manager internship, which I'm incredibly thankful for, so I could sort of
Mm.
try this out on for real, um, I found that I have so much energy I gain from thinking about what is the problem for my customers that I'm trying to solve? What are the things that bother them day after day? What are the things they complain about? And how do I help take all of that information and actually give a solution that doesn't just help one person, but helps many people. And then when I think about the other teams that I work with internally to ship that, I think it's really interesting to think about being a coordination point for not just how do we think about a engineering like something that's feasible for engineering, but how do we layer that on top with education that we need to do about it? How do we think about marketing? How do
Hmm.
we think about the customer research we need to do? And so I love being able to look at all those aspects. And as much as I love a good engineering problem to
Hmm.
dig through, I really thrive in the variety of work that I get to do as a product manager.
That is so interesting. And I think that I also see that in you. Like, I see your aptitude. I've seen you do a lot of demos, and you are so talented at doing those. Uh, and talking also, there is a market for people who can talk to engineers. I don't know if you know this, but not all engineers are great communicators. And so I think that somebody that has, an extra set of skills, um, bubbles up to the surface. And I really love what you said, that, you're really thankful for your internship. I think that's really important. And understanding that what you do in school, and this is actually one of the reasons I love school, and I'm a big believer in education, um, that when you're in school, don't think that what you are learning is going to be, the job that you are going to have when you graduate. There are jobs around the job that you are experiencing that are more fulfilling, and that perhaps you're gifted and talented for. And so, I've heard so many good things from people that explored internships. If you have a chance to do that, do as many of those as you can, and try to explore some of the peripheral things to
Yeah,
see if you have some skills and talents, right? I think maybe that's the kind of advice that I would give myself. Like, don't don't think that
absolutely.
this is it, you
Don't
know.
absolutely. I would agree with that. And I think, like to your point, I would just make a slight adjustment to one thing you said, which is I don't
Mm,
think engineers are bad communicators. They are just different communicators. And so,
you're
as
right.
a product manager, you have to figure out how to speak their language in the same way we're learning how to speak AI's language.
Interesting. That's right, because I remember, I think there was a thing a while back where they had the two AIs starting to talk to each other, and they like developed their own language. I think that's a bit of what happens with engineers. Like, we have our own language, and not everybody speaks engineerese, I guess. And
Yeah.
so I think you're right, because if you get, I mean, this is why I love also going to conferences and meeting people that are just like me and are excited about the same things. I feel like I can't talk to everybody, most of the people that I meet, but when I'm with my peeps, I can really geek out on things, and they
It's
get all
shared
my jokes.
context, right? It's all
Right.
the
Yeah.
shared context.
So I feel like maybe engineers are like those AIs, make up our own language, and we can communicate a lot faster and more effectively. And you're right, they're not bad communicators. It's just that they have a different focus. So
It's a
that's a good point.
Yeah, everyone's got their own communication styles. I think that's like one of the biggest for anyone thinking about product management. One of the pieces of advice I always give is it's really your job, in my opinion, to figure out how to best communicate with the people around you. As
Hmm.
someone who is the hub of product and actually getting something out, it's your job to figure out what matters to each of your teams and how you bring them together. And so learning how to talk the language of your marketing team and your engineering team and your leadership team is one of, if not the most important thing that I think you can focus on and cultivate in this role.
And I love what you said, that you had a sort of mentor that sort of, you know, let you know that they saw something in you related to, what you could be doing. And I think that, number one, I'm glad you're really thankful for that experience. But number two, I think when I meet somebody who is a great teacher, I always like try to encourage them, because that's what I know. I can tell when somebody is really gifted and that they really enjoy communicating and that they would have a good aptitude for something like this. So I try to
Mhm.
encourage that. In the same way, like you said, what you tell people is X, Y, Z. And I think that a lot of times, if people are going to see things, so maybe perhaps pay attention, or when somebody's telling you, hey, I think you would be a good XYZ, listen, because they're seeing things in you that perhaps you're not aware of. And I know that that happened for me in teaching. I've taught all my life. I was like a computer lab nerd in high school, right?
Love it.
And throughout my life, but I didn't have that job until like way later. So yeah, I think we have a responsibility to help others and to also listen to people whenever they notice something like that. So I'm super excited that you're going to be talking at Microsoft Build. Anytime you have a presentation, you are a really good presenter. I don't know if that's a product management skill, but it is a really good communication skill. So you have a talk that you're doing at Build with Burke, although he's not
Yep.
listed. So perhaps you can tell him that he's out next time you see him. Yeah, so this is the title of your talk is Pragmatic Techniques to Get the Most Out of GitHub Copilot. So what can you tell me about this session that you're having?
Yeah. So this is going to be really developer centric. I think we spend a lot of our
Okay.
demos, giving the nice shiny overview of what Copilot can do, but we all know there's a big difference between the keynote demo and using something in practice. And so
Mm-hmm.
this is going to be a really hands-on, demo heavy presentation around how you can get Copilot to really work for you in your day-to-day. So there are tips and tricks like adding comments and how you can signal intent to Copilot to make sure you're getting the best set of suggestions out of it. And so this is just really, if you're wondering how to make the jump from sort of playing around with Copilot versus it really providing a ton of value and it becoming an indispensable tool for you, this will be a great one to check out with Burke and I.
Super. And it is a free registration, so you can watch it online. You don't have to go you don't have to go all the way to Seattle to watch it, although you can if you want to.
You
So
can. We will be there in
mhm.
person.
Yeah, all together. And that's a lot of talent like in one stage. Burke is fantastic, although he's not fantastic enough to have put his profile properly, so I'm gonna have to bug him about this because I do see his name up here, but he's not like in the list of speakers. So more kudos to you, and I'll make sure I bug him about that. So
That'd be
I
great.
can't I'll definitely be watching online. So yeah, uh, excellent stuff. So next up, I just want to mention, just in closing, where you can learn more stuff. So if you been really honored to just have these conversations with fantastic people. So if you've been enjoying them, make sure you take the time to like and subscribe, like everyone says. And there's also a lot of ways that you can get more on these conversations. We have a page on LinkedIn, which is usually the best way to keep track of things. But we now also have a weekly newsletter, which I just started with Burke's episode last week. It gets mailed to you with a video of the show. You can watch, the video there. You can read detailed episode notes of everything that happened, all the links, and also there'll be links to the highlights, so you can just go to the answers to the questions. And then there's also an episode guide where you can, if you want to see all the previous episodes and what else is coming up. I usually try to put 2 or 3 speakers that are coming up. And if you just want to watch the videos, of course, there's like a YouTube playlist if you're just into the videos. And finally, I just created that audio podcast feed that I told you about, and I was actually listening to it. It's like, you know, audio podcast feeds are so interesting because it's like a different mode. I was just playing it while I was just chilling out, and I was like, oh, this is like, it, it's weird sometimes when you teach, you think, wow, these people are really interesting. And I don't want to pat myself too hard on the back, but I was like, wow, these are really great talks. I try to make it all about the person that's coming to talk to me. So thank you so much, Allison. I so much appreciate your time. And I know that you're
Absolutely.
super, super busy, and you've got a lot of stuff going on. So thank you so much for coming. And I'm sorry, people, about the comments. I'll have to go talk to my technologist to see what's going on there. But thank you again, and hopefully we'll see everyone next week. Let me just mention that next time we have Kate Strachnyi. We're going to be talking about building brands for technologists. So in a world where everybody is a creator now, how do you make sure that you learn to manage your brand? Is something a little bit different. We've been talking a lot to AI professionals, so we're switching context a little bit. She's a data analyst though, so she's a technologist herself, but also a content strategy. So I like to find interesting people that have that intersection that can be super interesting. So I can't wait to talk to her next week. Thank you again, Allison, and we'll talk to you later.